You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Nayak, a show to help professional moms in survival mode to take hold of their lives and thrive. If you're ready to take powerful action to create your best life, then this is the show for you. I'm your host, Dr. Prianca Nayak, board-certified internal medicine physician and certified life coach. Now let's get to it and dive in. You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, episode number 12. Hello, everybody. I have a very special episode today. It is my first interview. And the reason I did this interview is because I really want to dive deeply into issues that are not, fluffy or talking about stress and time management all the time, but really the things that people might feel isolated and alone in. And that includes divorce. And that's really the real talk part of the title of this podcast, Empowering Working Moms, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Nayak, because I want to cover the issues here that other people may not address. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Even if you feel isolated in your problems, you feel like your life is messy, you feel stuck, you're most certainly not alone. You're not alone here in this forum. Peace, freedom, and confidence, a fulfilled life are possible for you, even if it feels impossible right now, even if you're in a miserable career, job, miserable marriage, and it feels like, no way, you're crazy. What are you talking about? So the purpose of today's talk, I have a guest, Dr. Maneesha Ahluwalia, and she's a physician and life coach. She's going to talk about her journey with divorce. This is a topic that is often stigmatized in the South Asian community. People are raised to, and in many other cultures as well, people are raised to stay married no matter what. So she talks about how she navigates figuring out that she wants a divorce, moving through that process amicably and with love, and then her post-divorce life. Here we go. All right. I am so excited to have a guest, my very first guest on this podcast, Dr. Maneesha Ahluwalia. Is that how you say your name? I didn't ask.
Ahluwalia.
Ahluwalia. To really talk about, because on this podcast, the name includes Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Nayak. And I think part of the real talk is discussing the things that we don't want to talk about at dinner parties or maybe with certain friends. And we don't want to be open about the things that maybe we're ashamed of, or we feel alone, we feel scared. And one of those topics is divorce, even though we know that in this country, there's a 50% divorce rate. So 1 out of 2 married couples are destined for divorce, fortunately or unfortunately, however you see it. And yet somehow when women are going through this process, we just people feel alone, right? They feel so isolated. So I know Dr. Maneesha is super brave and she is willing to share with us her journey and all of the things. And hopefully this conversation that I have with her will give you not only the feeling that you are not alone, but also hope. So Maneesha, take it away and please introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, because Maneesha is a physician and life coach as well. And at the end, we can talk about where we can reach you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Priyanka. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to be here today as well. And this topic is something that I agree we want to talk about it more so that we don't feel as isolated going through it. And I'm an infectious disease physician. That's what I trained to do initially. And I practiced for 13 years in all types of different ways, as people do practice medicine, meaning like community hospitals and federally qualified health centers and humanitarian aid work, working abroad with Doctors Without Borders. And now mostly I work through an agency, like a travel doctor. So it's called locums for those of us who are not physicians. And that's what I do. I also certified as a life coach in 2020 through the Life Coach School. So I do that as well. And after divorce, I'm now a property manager of 2 properties that we acquired during divorce. So that I do that too. And in my spare time, I play a lot of tennis and I play competitively. It's my passion. And then I have my own personal time with friends and family and that kind of thing.
So Maneesha, I was thinking about divorce, and I know it's a very painful process regardless of the circumstances. And yet with coaching, or maybe if you have the coaching tools, you can still have the pain, but be living your best life. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great question to discuss here today because I've said so many times to myself and to others, I think the process that I went through with divorce was actually starting with just the decision making process. Like that first time you admit to yourself that this is what's next, that this is the next best step for you, that separation is the next best thing, that divorce is the right thing. Like when you're making those decisions, and then when you're going through the separation, and then when you're going through the divorce, and then when you're in that process after of sort of regrouping your life, I just think that all of that could have been so much worse had I not had the tools of self-coaching and also had the coaches for my own support. And because I had some of the tools that I could use for myself and also rely on some of the coaching, I do think that the process of divorce did not overtake everything. Maybe outside of me, maybe I wasn't, let's say, participating in sports as much as I would have, or maybe I wasn't working as much as I would have. But at the same time, like in my own head, I think I was still with myself, if that makes sense. I was still able to sort of meet myself where I was, regardless of the anger or the sadness. It was easier for me to be okay having those emotions rather than feeling like I'm probably doing it wrong. And I think that was the number one thing that I was aware was much better. I was okay being sad. I was okay being angry. I was okay being loving in the process. And I think that was because of the tools from coaching. And also just when I was making requests of my partner, like, couldn't we do it this way and make it work? Couldn't we do this and make it work? And when he had his own ideas and his own opinions and his own needs and desires that he was verbalizing, and they were different from mine, of course, there was a part of me that wanted to be angry and hurt that I wasn't enough, for example, to meet all of his needs. But I think because of the tools and coaching that we've learned, like just any tools that help you develop yourself, there's that possibility that you could see somebody else's thoughts, desires as their own and having nothing to do with you, having nothing to do with the fact that you didn't do enough or that you weren't enough. Having the awareness that like that person has their own needs and desires that really are separate from what you're providing, which takes a little bit of the pressure and the judgment off of yourself. And so I didn't feel, I think, that inadequacy as much as I would have had I not had the tools of coaching. Because in my story, we got together as sort of like people who were going to volunteer in the world, and we thought kids might be a hindrance to our work in the world. And so we decided we wouldn't have kids, but a couple of years into marriage, he decided that he wanted kids and kind of expected that I would have the same wishes and desires. But that never really came about for me. And despite that, I tried to have children and tried to get pregnant and really had a tough time. We started when I was 41. So I was a little bit older, even when I started trying. And then I tried for 4 years and I had all kinds of obstacles in that journey, which I can go into later if necessary. But in those obstacles, we went 4 years and we tried and we just never were successful. And at the end of it, I said, I'm kind of done trying. And I had to come to terms with this idea that I have done everything that I can, even if he still has an unmet desire. And those two ideas can exist mutually. and there's nothing more for me to do, right? To change the situation. And there's nothing else I am willing to do. And I understood that that was the most important lesson for me, is that, am I willing to do more? Even if I can do more, am I willing to do more? And when you use the tools of coaching and decide that this is what's best for you, is that you're not willing and you're not going to do more, and you're going to verbalize that, and you're going to say it out loud, and you're going to say it out loud multiple times to yourself, to your partner, to your family, to your loved ones who have lots of questions for you. That sort of power to be with yourself and your own thoughts, knowing that another person is feeling like you didn't do enough, but you can feel like you did do enough. I think that's where it really came in handy in those crucial moments.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. I'm getting chills just talking about it. And so I made a note of what you were talking about originally about loving yourself through the process. And I actually wanted to ask you, when you were trying, to have a family, was that in line with who you were, or do you feel like you were being loving towards yourself at that time?
At that time, I was being loving to myself, because for me, first and foremost, my priority is um, the relationship, the romantic love. It's always been a very important thing in my life. It's always been something I've sought after, but not in a way that it was hurried. I waited, like I was 37 when I got married, and I waited to find somebody that I really connected with. And so once I found him, I really wanted to make it work. And I thought that this was just one of the things you do in the relationship when you really I kept telling him, I don't want to have a kid, but I want to preserve our relationship, and I'm willing to try. And I was very clear about it in my head. Yeah, this is not really, motherhood was not something I imagined, and I don't really need it because I'm so content in the relationship. I don't need anything else. I'm content in my life and content in the relationship, in my family life. I didn't need anything more, but I was willing to do it because I wanted the relationship to work. And that was for me, right? Like if I want the relationship because it's my first priority in life, then I feel that that was for me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Can you describe then how you continue to love yourself because I do talk about self-love in a previous, like one of the prior episodes to this airing, but just kind of the role that self-love had as you moved towards that decision, as you got divorced and post-divorce,
Yeah.
staying true to that.
Well, a lot of it had to do with love for me, as my quote body failed me during attempts at trying to conceive. A lot of that was, so the reproductive endocrinologist, the doctors who help you get pregnant, they were telling me that I might need to lose weight so that I can fix my hormones and be a little bit healthier as I try to get pregnant. And so there was like a first shock at that point when, you're kind of mid 30s, you're a doctor, and you're being told that you need to get healthier in order to try to get pregnant. And I took it to an extreme, and I really went all in on that process of trying to improve my physiology, improve my health, so that I could better my chances of getting pregnant. And throughout that process, if anyone's ever tried to lose weight, like if you can either love yourself to skinny or you can hate yourself to skinny, and I think that was a big learning process, is like how to figure out that I'm going through the journey of getting healthier, but not as a means of punishing myself, but more as a means of loving my body and loving my, health, and optimizing my health towards this end goal of getting pregnant. So that was definitely one part where self-love had a big role. Like, I'm not going to do this with self-loathing. I have to do it through self-love. And the other part was just like all the effort that you put into trying to get pregnant and also sustaining a marriage that's strained means that you're removing yourself from other things because you just don't have the bandwidth.
That's right.
So when you're not going to X, Y, and Z's party, when you're not going to go attend whatever wedding, or you're not going to go to a baby shower, you're not going to go to anything related to weddings and receptions and babies, right? Because all of it's a trigger. You have to keep reminding or I had to keep reminding myself, this is what's best for me right now. I can't be there for everybody else while I'm also investing time and effort, excuse me, into what is the most important for me and therefore my marriage and to my husband and everything that means, my top priorities. I had to prioritize in a list and decide like my energy is going to have to go into these things and I have to sacrifice some things, which as physicians, we get good at anyways. But this was through self-love. This was not through pressure to perform so we can do good in medical school. This was, I have to put me first. I have to put us first. And that's the only way to move through the process, because there's only a finite amount of energy, right? So you can't give it to everybody else if you need a lot of it to give to you in the relationship. And that's another place I think where you have to be really honest and set up those boundaries with others in a loving way. It doesn't have to be done without kindness. It can definitely be done with kindness, but that was really important too. Another place that I did that was when I controlled the narrative with my family. And what I mean by that is, as I would tell my family what I'm going through, and I don't mean just my nuclear family, like my parents and my brother, but I mean like my extended family, all my aunts and uncles, and anybody who's Indian on this podcast, anybody who's raised in a big family can relate. When you have those chat groups where you update your family on what's going on and you post pictures and this and that. Well, I've always been open about everything. So there was no reason for me to not be open about separation, or actually fertility struggles, separation, divorce. I kept them abreast of everything as I was going through it. And I kind of realized that when I put stuff out there, not only on social media, but in my in my family chat groups, I think people got really uncomfortable and people started saying all kinds of weird things to me. And I was like, what are these remarks? What are these comments? How come nobody knows what to say? And so I just took it upon myself to say, these are the 3 things you might want to say, and feel free to pick from one of them. And that's what I mean by controlling the narrative, because otherwise I was being triggered left and right. And I also felt like nobody's understanding what I'm trying to say when I'm explaining what I'm going through. And if they're not going to understand what to say, they're not going to understand. I mean, if they're not understanding what I'm saying, they're not going to understand what to say back. So let me just also tell them what I need them to say. And it really worked well. I
I
think that's a
love
product.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know what else to do because I was getting really irritated that people
Yeah.
just kept saying the wrong things. You can imagine in the fertility journey.
Oh man. Oh,
And
well,
the separation.
I don't want to go off on like a tangent, but I feel
Yeah.
like I've had this conversation recently with other South Asians, that
Oh,
the culture is just, it's a lot of times there's no tact. Maybe that's just an American thing. I don't know, but people are tactless and they just kind of say, oh, and especially this is maybe not so related, but just scrutinizing things like looks and weight and talking about it and making comments first thing they see you. Oh, you gained weight. Oh, you haven't. Oh, I remember somebody calling someone Zadi Masi, which means like fat aunt. And then he started laughing and I was just like mortified because I'm thinking in my head, that's not really a joke. It's not funny. And do you like, how is this person the recipient of this bizarre joke, which it's not a joke, or even during my father-in-law's passing, I remember a lot of people were saying to my spouse and my mother-in-law, or what they would say to my spouse, oh, you have to be strong for like, don't cry. You have to be strong. And in my mind, I'm
yeah.
like, excuse me, like they get to grieve however they want to grieve. Like it's not for you to
Yeah.
tell them to be strong. But all
That's
kinds
right.
of weird, at least for our American ears, maybe, I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me. So I love that, that you decided what was helpful for you. Cause I think people, here's the thing, right? People mean well, I think for the most part, like family members, right? They mean well, they want to help. But a lot of times what people will say if they haven't been in your shoes or they don't know. And I think divorce is one of those areas in South Asian culture, which I want to dive a little bit deeper into this, but at least I know my family personally, like divorce is pretty unheard of. And so to even broach that topic is for me personally, it would be very uncomfortable because I would just feel like, oh, this is weird. Like nobody knows what this D word, what we speak of, like of what we speak. And so given that too, people definitely get uncomfortable and they don't know what to say because they haven't really probably dealt with it on a major scale.
Right. You're totally right. In my family, my two older cousins have been through divorce, and also a good friend who my parents know, also South Asian, has been through two divorces. They have a friend. My mom has a friend, so her age, who's been through, I think, two divorces. And there happens to be one other couple in their social circle that's been through a divorce as well. And you can probably tell in my voice, like I'm saying it with a lot of surprise and shock because it is so rare for us to know about it, even though it may be happening more often. So I wouldn't say it was the first in the family or first in our circle. It had been part of our family in the past, and it had been part of my parents' social circle in the past as well. But I think there's always this idea, probably for most cultures, that, oh, well, that's not going to happen here. And knowing, my parents knowing me and knowing my ex-husband now and what we had together, I don't think anybody saw it coming, which is probably very relatable. And we were open about our problems and we were talking about them often. And it wasn't in the closet. We weren't hiding anything. And even then, people really didn't know what to say. I mean, I think they just genuinely, like you said, wanted me to feel happier, even though I was going through some tough times. And the natural thing I think most people want to say is, don't feel sad, stay strong. Like you said, don't cry. But I think not meeting me where I was more hurtful than anything else. Like if I am sad, if I am relaying this to you and I'm telling you I'm sad and that I'm lonely or whatever, that's where I need you to let me be. And so I think me offering uh, or controlling the narrative and letting them pick from these two or three phrases helped them meet me where I was, and also help me feel like my family could understand where I am. Because when you give them the words to say and they can say them back to you, I think, or I like to think, that they did understand what I'm trying to say. And everybody wants to just be heard and understood, right?
Yes, that's a basic human need, I think.
That I think was helpful, even though it wasn't common, even though it was part of the family at some point, but still rare. We still don't know what to say. And then helping people know what to say is comforting and helps people be seen and heard, help me be seen and heard.
It's interesting to me that so divorce was happening in your or in your circles, maybe a little bit in your family. And so maybe the stigma wasn't as stigmatized. But
Yeah.
for the listeners out there, let's say that they don't maybe they don't have divorce in their family, or there is I know I personally was raised very much um I was taught to have decorum, and people can't know what's going on here, or if I was a teenage rebel. I had some, I don't know, I think I got caught drinking in the 10th grade. That was a big to do. Like nobody should know about that. Like, ooh,
Yeah.
and so from a relatively young age, especially as a teen, like I was supposed to be perfect, seem perfect, go to the best school possible, and so on and frickin' so forth. So the Indian parties, my parents could say, oh, she's going
Yeah.
to like this college. Oh, she's going to like, what are your daughters doing? Well, this one's in law school. This one's in med school. Oh, whoop, like great, like perfect. Like we're all on track. Right.
Yeah.
But the concept of, and even when I got married, I married somebody great on paper, like an orthopedic surgeon who went to Columbia. Like, that's like
Yeah.
every Indian parent's dream. Right. So that was probably fun for my parents to tell. But then if it would come to something like having to tell people, oh, there's a divorce happening, that would be of the utmost shame. And I think there's a lot of shame that goes on in many cultures, but most certainly South Asian culture, um, shaming that which isn't perfect or whatever, not meeting the standards. So for those people out there like struggling with secrecy or shame, having a seemingly perfect life, but maybe it's crumbling on the inside. And some people I think stay as a detriment to themselves in order to like to save face. Meanwhile, I was listening to a podcast recently and nobody gets a medal for like being miserable at home where nobody sees, just so that they have the stamp of that picture perfect family.
Yeah. So what to do when it's not really spoken about and you are deciding whether or not you should remain secretive or be open about it.
That's right.
And I think like at this point, probably the listeners of this podcast have lived enough life to know that what we're all hiding is not that secretive. I mean, it's happening all the time. And it's not a secret. It's just we're not talking about it. And who is it helping to not talk about it? That's what motivates me to talk about it. It's like if I'm hiding it and the next person's hiding it, then people are going to feel alone. And for me, things like social media, Facebook has been an amazing place to share humanity. And for me, it's brought so much. The more I share, the more it brings me. And when I get scared to share, it makes me feel small. When I share, I get so much love back, so much feedback in the positive way. It makes me open up more. And I think it's helped my parents see that being open has actually brought pride from the community. Like, look at your daughter, so brave and so courageous to share so many personal things in such a beautiful way. And then other people can really understand what she's going through, why she's going through it, why she's doing what she's doing. It kind of helps people not make the judgmental remarks and maybe not have so much judgment because there's so much detail in the post, for example. You can't help but understand exactly what is going on so that there isn't secrecy. It's all out in the open. There's nothing to gossip about at that point. And that kind of what de-escalates that whole cultural setup that we have right in our community, which is like, let's gossip about this and that, and let's talk behind everybody's back and let's compare. But if it's all out in the open, we're destigmatizing life because everything messy that I share is true life, isn't it? I mean, like half the people are going through it. So it must be real life. And if we're going to talk about it, I mean, if we're not going to talk about it, it's just going to stay hush hush. We're going to prolong the stigma. We're going to prolong the secrecy. And it's not doing anybody's mental health any good. I think it just depends on your personal motivation. My motivation is to make sure that other people know that this is normal, and normalizing as much as I can in public has always been a motivation for me. I don't know where it comes from, but that's why I don't stay secret. That's why I don't keep it to myself. That's why I share almost everything that has happened.
I love your bravery and your openness. And I think that many women can benefit from seeing your posts. And at the end, you can tell them where they can find you so they can see all this magic that you post. Yeah. So what I think I find so ironic, I guess, about all this is, like we said, 50% of the population or 50% of married people get divorced. So it's really not, it's a high amount of people. And yet the shame still exists. And it sometimes women can feel like they're the only ones, or why am I the weirdo? Or why am I like, why is this happening to me? And all this stuff. Do you have any words on like coping with that, like being in the 50% that does get divorced?
I think I think it I think everybody asks those questions. Why is this happening to me? It's probably just me. It's probably something I did. And I think a lot of that is based on the lack of empowerment, self-empowerment, self-love, self-trust. And so it's not it's not a problem that you're facing these demons for the first time at this point in the process. Like, as you're saying to yourself, I need to do this for me, but I feel like a failure. I need to get a divorce, but this makes me feel like a failure, or that my marriage was a failure, or whatever. This is normal. Like, this is what most people are going to think on both sides, probably. I would guess that the partner is thinking the same thing. And I think it's okay to face that. I think it's normal to face that. And then what happens after you face it is really the crucial part, right? Like, after you face this reality that you think you're a failure, then what? Are you going to believe it, or are you going to prove it wrong? In other words, are you going to meet yourself as a person who thinks they're a failure and just keep believing it? Or you're going to meet yourself as a person who thinks you're a failure and then say, yeah, that's probably not true, because I know myself. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I'm willing to do. These are the ways in which I know I have self-love. Like, you can challenge your own thoughts. So of course, I think most people will feel that, but then is it really true? And I think that's a great question to ask. You don't have to believe everything that you think, right?
We know that, especially thoughts that don't serve us.
Yeah.
And I think for those who are not as brave as you, and maybe worried about what other people will think, or whatever facade gets shattered, right? That can be tough for people. Realizing that people, like the gossiping, for example, it's a span of like 30 seconds to a few minutes of like
Mhm.
whatever conversation, and then they move on. They don't care. They have their own problems. That's number one. Number two, nobody's in your shoes. Nobody knows what you're going through. So ultimately, only you can decide being true to yourself is. Nobody has those answers, and tapping into your own power, right? To make that decision.
Yeah.
Which also brings me to a question for you. So we kind of talked about how you moved through the divorce. You controlled the narrative with your family. You got support. You continue to live your best life. And for those who are afraid of divorce, wondering if they should do it, how about where you are on the other side now?
Well, in the process, as most people will tell you, you learn who your people are. You learn who your supporters are, and you learn who the haters are. And I found out that I had a ton more support than I ever knew. I learned that I have an just a super supportive group of friends locally where I live, which I didn't realize. I mean, they came out of the woodwork, and little gifts left on the porch, and invitations and texts and Facebook messages, checking on you, sending support, that kind of thing. You know, being there when I needed to move back into the house that we separated from, like moving back into the house that was full of memories, and finding a group of friends that now had more in common with my current self, like a group of friends who are really interested in sports, and also maybe divorced or never married, also no children, finding another new type of identity where I did fit in. It was really interesting. Like, I never imagined it, because I kind of had the usual, I'm Indian, I'm a doctor, I'm married, I'm going to have kids, and my friends are kind of similar. And all of a sudden, on the other side of divorce, I have this whole new life with a new type of group of friends and a lot of support. And I'm not saying I'm not down with the Indian crowd anymore. I definitely am. I still have my core group of friends, but I also have an openness to a whole new community. And I think I embraced that because I saw how much support I was getting. So there's that on the other side. And I think the other huge part that I never expected was meeting someone new. Um, my neighbor, in fact, walking his dog, and running into me on the street and saying hello and asking me to come to softball, and going to softball, and then hanging out with the whole softball crew afterwards at the local hangout, and walking dogs every night with this new person, getting to know him. And now in a whole new relationship with this person who I have called my final chapter, and when I said those words out loud, I was like, where did that come from? Because how do you grieve one relationship and fall in love with a new person at the same time? It's kind of bizarre, but it's also very possible. And that was very encouraging for me to see that I can actually fall in love again. Because, like I said in the very beginning, romantic love is very important to me. I like being in a relationship. I like sharing love. I like giving love. I like receiving love. This is very important to me. And to know that I could give love again, that I could receive love again in a way that is profound, not just I'm going to settle for somebody who wants to spend their life with me or spend, be in a relationship with me. I'm very much in love again. And that was very soon after the separation. I met him 5 months after I separated from my husband. I mean, I don't know how that happened. Some people said, isn't it too soon? Well, I don't know what too soon is anymore. How can you even define it? And it works for me. And my parents and my family and the way they've taken him in, the way they've accepted him, it's seamless. And maybe it's a result of me being very open and honest with what happened in the last year or 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I think everyone has felt that because I'm so open, they can understand me and they can accept whatever's happening with my life in a way that's not threatening to anybody. There's no secrets, right? I just think all of it has been helpful, to be open, to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be detailed. Let them see what's going on and then be open as new things are happening, and everybody's just embracing it to the point where, I can share this with my family without feeling weird about it. Yes, I'm a grown woman. Yes, I'm 46. It's okay for me to have my own life, but it's also nice, especially when you're South Asian, to have your parents' approval. That's important to us.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's really nice to be having a new relationship and have the approval of my parents at the same time. There's no struggle here.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to address the people who maybe again may not be as willing to be open, or being open for them is a big stretch, at least maybe now. But for them, you can still build your tribe. You can still pick people, whether it's family members or friends in your circles that you trust, and you lean on them. And one of the key things, and tell me if this was true for you, asking for help, be it with a therapist, a coach, friends, just letting people know that you're in pain and you could use somebody to grab a cup of coffee with or whatever. Did you find yourself reaching out as well, as much as you had the influx of support?
There's a part of me that was a little bit resistant to taking people's advice. I think because I am a coach and because I was getting coached. I remember somebody suggesting, look, you're going through a divorce, you might want to get a therapist. And at first I was like, I don't need a therapist. I'm a coach myself. I have coaching friends. I have coaches. I have friends. But I took the advice anyways. And I hired a therapist, a South Asian therapist, actually. And she and I had some great talks. I don't know if it helped, but it was nice to have somebody to converse with once a week, somebody neutral, somebody who knows how to redirect thoughts when they may not be serving you, just like a coach might. I also had coaching sessions, and actually, one coaching session I remember very clearly where I heard something new. She said, this was when I was first trying to figure out if I do want to get the divorce or say that I want a divorce. She said, you're in a lot of pain right now, and your husband's probably in a lot of pain right now, and your relationship's in a lot of pain. What's the most loving thing you can do at this point? And that's when it became clear I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to wait. I wanted to pause. I wanted to take a break from all decision making. And in a way, that was a decision I was making, right? I'm deciding not to do anything. But it was because she posed it in that way. So the idea is that this help that's available from either, any kind of mental health professional is that there's a new way to look at things that maybe you're not. And the way she said it, what's the most loving thing you can do for you and your husband and your relationship? And it just became clear when she posed it that way. I don't want to do anything right now. And so we did. We just took a break and decided nothing. And we took maybe, I think, 6 weeks, maybe a couple of months to figure out what we really wanted. And then both came to the conclusion at the same time, which was helpful. And we did the whole divorce very lovingly, very amicably. We didn't have children, but we did have properties, and we did have adopted embryos, actually. And we needed to figure out what to do with all of that. And we kind of decided we weren't going to exchange any money. And we were going to do it very lovingly and not contend anything. And it's a non-contentious divorce. We just pulled a document from Google and had it reviewed with a couple of lawyers, and that was the end of that. It was very fast. We separated in July. We were divorced by March. But yeah, the mental health professionals, I think they help open up your mind to new ideas so that you can think differently, so that you can feel differently, so that you can act differently and move forward. Decision making, I think, is super hard, but with the help of other people, it can be easier.
Absolutely. And not just mental health professionals, also just friends to give you a hug or just listen to you. Because I think most of the time, and again, like you said, I think getting advice, nobody wants advice. We all figure out what we're doing. We're all grown ups here. We're allowed to make our own quote unquote mistakes, whatever. Right. Yeah. So I learned that recently, not in the past few years. I learned, so I used to love to give unsolicited advice. I thought it was so fun because I think that's how I grew up. And I realized nobody wants this. Like everybody's just on their own journey. Right. So, yeah. but just, and now I've learned, especially with coaching, just to be a better listener, because people just want to be heard. And they want to be loved and they want to belong. And so just getting that, let's say from friends, you could even tell a friend, hey, I'm going through a hard time. Let's go get a cup of coffee. I could use an ear. Yeah. I don't want any advice, or just so that you feel like you're not alone, because you're not, as much as it may feel that way.
I also have a very like a small core group of 3 other girlfriends, and they're all married with children. And I often felt like they're never going to be able to understand what I'm going through, but it just took a little bit of patience and grace for also just my friends. I mean, how could they know what I'm going through unless I tell them? But I wasn't giving them the benefit of the doubt. And they really came through. Like, they were great listeners. They were very empathetic. And they didn't have to know exactly what it felt like, but they could really just honor where I was. And it was, give your people a chance, even if they're not in your shoes, is what I'm saying. And they can be your friends. They can be mental health professionals. They could be new friends. They could be old friends, all of that.
Wonderful. Yes. People can surprise you for sure. And I love that. Just give them a chance very much, because the people who love us unconditionally, right? Because it's unconditional. So divorce, not divorced, whatever it is, they'll support you no matter what.
Very true.
So thank you so much for talking today to all of us. And I want the listeners to know where they can reach you, how they can get in touch with you, what services that you provide.
Okay. I'm on most of my sort of most vulnerable posts are on my personal Facebook page. So that's just Maneesha Ahluwalia. And it's a public page. It's not private. There's no privacy settings on there. And I'm on Instagram as Dr. Maneesha A. That's my personal Instagram. Then I have my coaching professional Facebook and Instagram. So it's Life Coaching with Indians. Life Coaching for Indians on Facebook and on Instagram as well. So that's where you can find me. It's not hard. I'm not hidden. It's my first and last name. So.
And I will put the links in the show notes as well.
Sounds good.
If people want to reach. Well, thanks for joining us, and I will talk to everyone next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Nayak. If you are ready to get unstuck and out of survival mode to live your best life, I want to invite you to book a free 30-minute consultation call with me. To get started, visit priyankanayakmdcoaching.as.me. Link in the show notes.